Welcome to another episode of the Superpowered Fancast. This is Darren. So, this episode is a special one for me, and it's going to be pretty much just about Star Trek because I'm a huge Trek nerd, a Trek geek, a Trekkie, a Trekker, whatever you want to call it. And I got the privilege of spending time with some of my favorite Star Trek stars last week at Dragon Con in Atlanta. So I'm going to talk about that experience as well. And if my voice sounds a little off, it's because, you can't walk out of something that awesome unscathed. So I got a little bit of the con crud going on. So throat's a little dry, a little scratchy. I got a little bit of a cold, so I'm kind of, working it out as best I can. But because this is so important to me, because this is so much fun, it was so much fun. I want to talk about the experience. I want to talk about everything I can't talk about everything, but I'll talk about some of the things that I really enjoyed, and just talk about the experience as a whole. And I think I'm just going to narrow it down to Trek related things. So I'm going to be talking about Dragon Con. I've talked about it pretty much all week. I've written about it on the website superpoweredfancast.com. I've written articles about it on Geeks Worldwide at the www.thegww.com, so you can check those out and see read about my thoughts about Dragon Con and how awesome it was. But like I said, I think I'm just going to narrow it down to Trek for this episode. And I guess we just go ahead and get started. Well, you know what? The first thing I want to do is I want to thank everyone who listens. Everyone who's been listening since I made the transition from a foursome to basically just me. I really want to thank you all for continuing that journey. And I'm going to continue to try and not have it just be me talking about things. And I'm going to keep trying to bring guests on. I got a special Game of Thrones episode coming up where it's just me and my wife and some of our mutual friends just talking about Game of Thrones. So that's going to be fun. Then I'm going to have another couple episodes coming up that are going to have some audio embeds and hopefully some interviews coming up, and just keeping the momentum going, just keeping it weekly. But just to get started, I'm going to talk about, like I said, this episode is basically just going to be about Star Trek. So I guess part of the first piece of news I can talk about is that Star Trek is returning. Star Trek Discovery will have its first episode. Its premiere will be September 24th on CBS at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 9:30 Pacific, and this is before it goes to CBS All Access. So at the very least, you'll be able to get to see the first episode of Star Trek Discovery and maybe get a sense of whether or not you want to continue watching. As much as I love Star Trek, I'm still on the fence about subscription services. I don't, even though I cut the cord like cable wise like years ago and haven't looked back, I'm just not, I don't particularly feel the urge or the need to buy a network. If I'm going to get a service, I want a service. Like I don't know if I'm going to spend that money per month to watch one show. Because honestly, I don't know what else CBS has on that I would be willing to spend any money on, considering that I could watch it for free on CBS. So, I don't know. I don't know what the deal is with it. I don't know what they're trying to go for. I just know I'm not necessarily on board with the service, but at the very least, I'm going to watch the first episode of Star Trek Discovery because it is, despite all the controversy, it is looking a lot better. Now, in other Trek news, I can't necessarily say this news, but I was at while I was at Dragon Con, I went to the Star Trek: The Next Generation panel. They're celebrating 30 years of Star Trek: The Next Generation, and so they had Michael Dorn, who plays Worf. They had Jonathan Frakes plays Commander Riker. Gates McFadden plays Dr. Crusher. Marina Sirtis, who played Counselor Troy, and Brent Spiner, who plays Data. Now, it was actually moderated by Garrett Wang, who was Ensign Harry Kim on Star Trek Voyager. So he's kind of, he's in the Star Trek fold. So he was moderating the panel, and it was really fun. It was just, people got up and they asked their questions. I got up to ask a question, and it was that moment where I had a question like prepared, and then they went ahead and said last question, and it was the person on the opposite side of me. So I didn't get to ask my question of the group, but it was still really gracious. Everyone was really nice. I got to see Marina Sirtis after the panel, and I shook her hand, and she was very sweet. She's a very nice lady. Her Twitter feed is amazing, by the way. Like it's fun, it's funny, and she's I'll put it to you this way: she is honest. She is honest as all get out, and it's definitely worth following her on Twitter. But as far as that goes, like they were talking about, they talked about the show, and they talked about like memories of the show and the people that asked questions, and it was really fun. And I think I have the audio of it. I may not have the whole thing, but whatever I do, I actually may go ahead and do that on a future episode. But this episode is actually all about Trek, and at the end is going to be my interview. Well, me and other people. Like it was a press conference format, but an interview with Michael Dorn himself. So it'll be an interview with Worf, and he was very sweet. He was very gracious. Answered our questions. It was very funny. We had to take pictures after that. So I got a picture of me standing next to one of my heroes, because he was one of my heroes. He was just as someone who suffers from depression. I'm not, I didn't necessarily get emotional around other people. I didn't necessarily want to, feel emotions or necessarily be emotional. And he could, he conveyed in Worf, strength, and at the same time, allowed emotions to happen, but was able to kind of control them. And I think that's kind of what I responded to, was his ability to kind of control his emotions, because of, I'm a big guy. I always have been. So I've always felt that if I didn't control my emotions, somebody could get hurt. So it was always kind of gratifying that I could look to him as that example, and just kind of, keep my wits about me, and keep my composure. Even though I know, like the person in front of me, I could, tear apart like a piece of tissue paper. I never kind of went there, but the panel was really cool, and it was. But my question was, and I actually had a question that had nothing to do with Star Trek, because everyone on the panel had done voices for one of my favorite animated series, Gargoyles, by Greg Weisman. And my question was, if Weisman, because Weisman was also involved in Young Justice, with Young Justice coming back, with Young Justice Outcast, if they did a Gargoyles revival, would they come back? So that was going to be my question. So I didn't necessarily get a chance. I didn't get to ask that question of the panel, but being in the world of technology and social media, I went ahead and tagged each one of them in a Twitter post, and asked the question, and literally just kind of went with, I didn't get a chance to ask my question of the group, so I just want to kind of go ahead and ask it now. And it was, it was funny that it almost immediately, because I tagged, because I follow them all on Twitter. Like I follow Jonathan Frakes, I follow Michael Dorn, I follow Gates McFadden, I follow Brent Spiner, I follow Marina Sirtis on Twitter. So I went ahead and just kind of asked them all my question, and there was no expectation of anything. I didn't really expect anyone to respond, but I did actually get a response from Brent Spiner, who, when I asked the question, he said, yep. Now, I didn't know if he was speaking for the group or if he was speaking for himself, but it'd be nice to think that they kind of, that they collectively thought about it and would have considered it, because I think they were all amazing on that series. And just the fact that I can, remember, I can remember their characters. Like I can remember that Brent Spiner was Puck, and I can remember that that Jonathan Frakes was Xanatos, and I can remember that Marina Sirtis was Demona, and Michael Dorn was my favorite character, one of my favorite characters next to Goliath, the Cold Stone, just because having to deal with the personalities of so many different gargoyles, like it was an amazing characterization. So I loved Cold Stone. So that was awesome that I got to at the very least ask that question and get a response in some way from Brent Spiner. So I want to thank you, Mr. Spiner, definitely for that. I really appreciate it. But without further ado, because I could continue to prattle on about Star Trek, or I could just go ahead and let you all listen to Michael Dorn talk about his time on Star Trek, his aspirations. Like, did you know that he really just that he got into the business to be a director? I didn't know that, and I've been following the man's career for almost 30 years now. So it was an interesting conversation. I'm hoping the audio is good. If it's not, let me know and I'll try and do what I can to fix it. But it's kind of the best of what I could do at the time, and just kind of dealing with the equipment that I had. Because what I did was I tried to record both the audio and audio separately. So I put like a handheld voice recorder next to him, and that's literally the audio you're going to hear. But I also set up my video camera and tripod, and for some reason I got none of the video, and that sucked. Oh, it was so horrible, because I really wanted that video. It was so cool, but I didn't get any of the video. So I did get the audio, and that's what's going up on the podcast this evening. So for everyone who's listening, without further ado, Mr. Michael. Oh, well, I'm sorry. I'm going to say that. You're going to hear like sound effects. In fact, you're probably going to hear my camera shutting itself off and on a couple of times, the video camera. So again, just bear with me. I'm sorry about it. I'm still relatively new at a lot of this stuff, especially the production aspect of it. But I'm doing my best to get my sea legs, and any advice is definitely welcome. So without further ado, Michael Dorn.
Agility, my age has never been a factor. 65 is not old for a football player. So I think I'm sorry. Yes.
Michael, Charles Evans, fanside.com. You directed one of my favorite DS9 episodes ever, Inquisition.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to know if you have any interest in continuing to direct, and would you be open, Jonathan Frakes is directing an episode of The Orville coming up, would you be open to directing possibly something like The Orville or even a future Star Trek episode?
Interesting enough, that's why I got in the business, to be a director. And I got waylaid by acting. I love acting, and so I got waylaid, and I always was putting off directing, for a year or something like that. And then it's 40 years later. And I finally got the opportunity on Deep Space. And I really wanted to do it. That's why, when I left Deep Space, it was like, go in that direction. And I directed a couple of other shows that were very happy with my work, and it, contracted me to do more shows, and both shows got canceled. And then I was contracted to do one guaranteed show and 3 pay or play on Enterprise, and that didn't work out, and it was just a whole kind of comedy of errors, and time goes by. But I love it. I love directing, and I would love to do it. I mean, it's just one of those things. Directing is it's much harder than acting, because it's about knowing that one guy that goes, yes, you're going to do it. Like Chandra Rhimes, if she says, oh, I want him to direct, you're going to direct. It's one of those things. And so and it's a difficult thing. It's really difficult, really difficult. Jonathan and LeVar are very fortunate and wonderful directors, so they're able to move in and out of that world very easily.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I kind of just want to talk about the totality of having such a robust career, and living in a kind of a dream space where you are doing a job and have this space in pop culture and nerd culture history. Just kind of, what does that look like from the inside looking outward? Like, what does it feel and look like to you?
To me, I've always been a fairly simple guy, and I never really looked at anything except as a good job, as sort of my middle class upbringing, and my focus was always on the work, and so I didn't really get the whole pop culture. I mean, I knew that Star Trek was a huge thing because I was a fan of the original show, but I didn't know how big it was going to be until way after it was over, and then you get a sense of that. I think if I was somebody else, you might look at it as a detriment because, that's it, and you may not work ever again, or you may not have that type of success again. But luckily I did a show many years ago where I got just a tiny bit of start, just a little tiny bit, and it showed me what the business was like. And so when this came along, I was prepared. I wasn't looking at it as, as something that was, oh my God, I'm going to be in the, in this pop icon, or whatever the case that people would want to say. I was just happy to have a good job. And if somebody said, Michael, that's it, you're done, you're not going to do anything else, I would say 11 years and 5 movies is a good run, a very good run. So I think I look at it as very fortunate, and that's about it.
Thank you.
I'm honored. I mean,
Right.
and plus, the conventions are just out of control still. I mean, seriously, 3,000 people in a room and 2,000 people in a room to listen to us, prattle on. I mean, you just don't get that anywhere. So we always say it's the gift that keeps on giving. So yeah, Superman.
Thank you. Could you tell us about your Star Trek headpiece?
Yeah.
Was it like a singular unit? And when you put it on, did it kind of transform you as an actor?
Not as an actor, but as Michael Dorn, grumpy and surly, yeah, because it was, it's a 4-step, let me count it. The headpiece comes on, the nose, the hair, the beard, and the teeth. So there was a 5-step process. Yeah. And it was not heavy or anything like that, but it was seriously uncomfortable. It was like, and they put it on with spirit gum, which is basically airplane glue, and at that point, makeup hadn't progressed in 70 years. It was still doing the same makeup that they did with the original Frankenstein,
Wow.
And Mike Westmore, who had a long lineage of makeup artists in his family, did it the same way, and they had to change it after 2 years because it became one of those situations where I seriously went up there to the producers and told them I can't do this anymore. Second season, I'm done. I love the script, love the actors, I love what I do, I love the character, I mean, everything. Just can't, I need to have a career after this is over, and I wasn't going to. I mean, it was going to be seriously scarred. Maybe I should have just done it and then sued the shit out of it. Anyway, yeah, that's yes, sir.
DragonCon is having a screening of a film you did with 40 other Star Trek alum called Unbelievable. How did that process, how did you get involved in that?
That was a fairly bizarre process because it took a very long time to get it to, to this point. And I was contacted by these producers and this director. And I had lunch with them, and I'm looking around, and it's a fairly motley group, it was like very different people. And I go, oh, and the script has changed dramatically over the years, and I kind of honor my, my commitments. And so when they said, okay, we're ready to shoot your scene, or your couple scenes, whatever the case, I showed up in Malibu, shot the scene, and that was it. I mean, it's kind of bizarre, but it's not too bizarre because a lot of times with guest stars on TV and guest stars in movies, that's all you do anyway. Show up, you read the script, you show up, shoot the thing, and then you're done. And then you go to the screening to see, if you were any good. So, yes.
I'm sorry, I was going to call last call. I mean, last call. Last call. No, last question.
I wonder what's
please.
on your mind.
I'll make this brief. Hi, I'm Crystal Sparrow from Black Girl Nerds. I wanted to know, okay, so Star Trek, at the end of Deep Space Nine, that was the end of the canon. Everything else has been a prequel or sidequel. Do you ever think about, I know you inhabited Worf for like 11 years, like you said. Do you ever think about what that character would have done post that story?
Post.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I wrote a script, and I had this idea to do a Worf spinoff, and it was the theory or the gist of the story was basically the thought behind the process was that we liked the Klingons a lot. The fans really liked the Klingons, and we've always scratched the surface. Always. There's never been, except in Deep Space Nine, they got further and further into the whole Klingon culture, which was great, but they never really dealt with it completely. And I always thought it was very interesting. Like I said, the fans loved the whole Klingon mythology, and it's very Shakespeare, very Shakespeare. And so the story was basically that he goes back to the Klingon Empire, and he is fighting to keep the empire together because it is doing what it's always done, and it's destroying itself from the inside. Coups and assassinations and grab for power, and it's just a normal thing. In fact, one of the characters has a line where they say, "Why are you doing this?" Because we're and she goes, "That's it. It's just power. That's there's no item of great power that's going to change it's just intrigue, and that's all. And they've hung on to that for centuries. But the Klingon Empire is changing, and in the script there were other aliens, there were humans, there were other on the Klingon Empire, which, interestingly enough, I didn't think about this when I was writing it, which was 12 years ago. It echoes what's happening now, is that the Klingon Empire is pointing at these aliens and pointing at these people going, that's why, that's the problem. They're the ones that are causing us to, which is not true.
Right.
But, and that was the entry. And it had legs for a bit. I mean, I got a couple of meetings and people were very interested, but with the business, it kind of fell by the wayside, which is too bad. But he would be on a ship out there, adventure, going to different places, really trying to keep the Klingon Empire together, but out there exploring because he loves being on a ship. He loves being out there, being in the front lines. And there would be 2 major battles per episode and 2 hand-to-hand fights per episode.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I know. You're welcome. That's it.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank
You
you
bet.
so much.
Thank you.
So there you have it. That would be the awesome Michael Dorn. Once again, he was really great, and I appreciate the time I got to spend with him. His poise, his dignity, his grace, his humor. It was a really great time, and like I said, I appreciated not only every moment of it, but just the entire Dragon Con experience. Like I appreciated the entire experience, and I'm still on a bit of a high after the weekend. And it's been like, I've been home like for 3 days, but I'm still just kind of feeling excuse me, I'm still kind of feeling that that momentum. It's actually really kind of helped me in my creativity. I'm still, I've been writing left and right and just kind of doing as much as I can. And on that note, once again, thank you for listening. If you want to contact me, please feel free. You can follow me on Twitter at superpoweredfan. You can go to my Facebook page, it'll be facebook.com/superpoweredfancast. This will be on my YouTube channels. You can go to YouTube and check it out. And you can also, what else? You can email me at superpoweredfancast@gmail.com. You can read my articles on superpoweredfancast.com. And you can also find me in my news articles and comic book reviews and a lot of my Dragon Con coverage on Geeks Worldwide. That would be www.thegww.com. And so for Superpowered Fancast, this is Darren saying see you next week. All right, bye.
This has been a production of the GWW Radio Network. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Also, check out Geeks Worldwide at thegww.com for all the latest news, reviews, and opinions on video games, comics, movies, TV, cosplay, and more. Geeks Assemble!